Polygamy, What Love Is This? I'm your host, Doris Hanson, and we do talk about polygamy here. That's why we do the show. And there's always a lot to talk about polygamy for our viewers who have watched very many times understand. Those who believe that polygamy once was or even is something that God has required for salvation, but there are no biblical proofs for that belief. In fact, there are so many scriptures that people who teach that will twist to make it sound like it's something that God has commanded, but it isn't. Only man has commanded polygamy. Tonight we are not a live broadcast. We are taping this show to show at a later date, so we will not be a telephone call-in program. So although you may have the urge to call in as we go through the show, don't do it because there won't be anyone there to answer your call since this is a pre-recorded show. If you do have comments about the contents of our show tonight, just email it to us at tv@aboutpolygamy.com, and we would love to hear from you, what you think of what we're talking about tonight. And of course we will answer you. We do have a very special show planned for you tonight, and it's something that could only have been accomplished by pre-recording the program to take advantage of our special guests who just happened to be in the area at the same time. And so we decided that we would pre-record the show for your information of what we want to talk about. For questions and comments about polygamy or the contents of the show or other shows, or just questions that you may have regarding the entire subject of polygamy, we invite you to email us at tv@aboutpolygamy.com or call in, watch our show next week, and you'll be able to call in at our live show. For our new viewers that may be watching tonight, we welcome you to the program. We do this every Thursday night at 8 p.m. on KTMW TV 20, and we invite you to watch us in the following weeks. You can go on to our website, whatloveisthis.tv, and you can watch all of our previous programs there on streaming video. A reminder that we do have a monthly discussion group. We meet in the Salt Lake City area on the third Monday of each month. It's been a very productive group. It's beneficial to those who come. We invite you to come. Again, we realize that people who have been or are in polygamy have a lot of fear about coming and revealing your feelings and things that you have learned that you've been threatened not to talk about, but really there's no fear. Everything is confidential, and everyone who comes to these discussion groups are very kind and understanding, and we would just love to minister to you there. If you want to come, give me an email to tv@aboutpolygamy.com and I'll give you the details. And don't forget that we are offering the DVD, Lifting the Veil of Polygamy, absolutely free to those who have been or are in polygamy groups. We're also including in the free offer the book, Is Polygamy Biblical? And we'll offer it also free to anyone who is in the LDS Church. If you're interested in studying up on this information, just give us a call, let us know, email us, and let us know how to get it to you, and we'll mail it to you free with no strings attached. If you're in a polygamy group, pardon me, and you need help, you can call us on our toll-free number. It's 877-425-9993, and we'll do everything that we can to help you. If you have questions regarding polygamy, if you have doubts, if you're in a situation that's abusive or an emergency situation, give us a call and we will do everything we can to help you. You can go onto our website, shieldandrefuge.org, and learn more about our ministry and about us and what we can and will do to help you if you are in a and if you just have questions and you just want to talk, give us a call and we'll be happy to talk with you. I received an email in July that I would like to share with our viewers tonight. The person who wrote the email, her name is Carol, and she said, "Dear Doris, I have watched Polygamy, What Love Is This from the first program. As a Christian from another state, I had some ugly, preconceived ideas about the people who practice polygamy. My ideas were all the girls and women were victims, while all the men were controlling tyrants. Thanks to your program, I have a more fair and balanced understanding of the men and women in polygamy. Now I understand that the men and boys have also been exploited in a most cruel and shoddy manner. As a mother watching my youngest son coaching Little League, baseball, teaching them how to fish, reading them stories. I now realize that the men in polygamy may father many children, but they have been robbed of being a daddy to their offspring. That is not how the God I worship intended families to live. God bless you as you share God's love and words of freedom. God bless you as you help people like me to consider all the facets of polygamy. And we would like to thank Carol for writing this email to us. It's encouraging, and it brings up an aspect that many people don't think of, and that is that few people really realize that the men or the males in polygamy are victimized as much as the women. We seem to think that the women and the children are the victims, but the boys all are also victimized. I wonder, as she mentioned in her email, if the men in the polygamy groups who have fathered so many children even realize, as she mentioned, that they are being robbed of being a daddy. They have so many children that they can't properly be a daddy to all those children. There's some of them will have dozens of children. I also often wonder, why must a man in a polygamy group have more than 2 wives to be a polygamist? I think it only takes 2 to make you a polygamist. Why do you have to have 5 or 10 or 25 or 40 or 75 wives? And of course, the more wives you have, the more children you have. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, I know the thinking is that the more wives you have, the more children they have, the more powerful you'll be on the other side, and you'll become a god of all these worlds and so on. But if what you teach holds true, all of your children are supposed to become gods themselves, so they're not going to be hanging around you in the celestial glory, so that's not going to be helpful to you. And you know, there's just questions here that doesn't quite add up. The pieces of the puzzle don't fit together. And we're going to talk about these and other issues tonight with our special guests. So hold on to that thought as I introduce our special guests tonight. I would like first to welcome to the show Kathie Jo Nicholson. She was our guest in March, on March 26th of this year. She was born and raised in the FLDS polygamy group, which is now predominantly in Colorado City area. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And my next introduction is to welcome Susan Schmidt. She was our guest in October of last year, and also again on August 23rd, last summer. She's a former plural wife of Verlin LeBaron, and we did discuss the brutal blood atonement murders commanded by Ervil LeBaron and all of his henchmen, and we want to welcome both of you beautiful ladies to our show tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
And thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. We have some interesting things. And I want you to know that this was a spur of the moment. And for you to be willing to come on the spur of the moment like you did is very commendable. And I hope that we're able to communicate what we want to tonight to our viewers. Susan, you have written a book.
Yes.
And it's recently been revamped, and I'm going to show the book to the audience, and then I want you to tell them where they can buy the book. Okay. She's written a book, and it's called Favorite Wife, Escape from Polygamy, and it's published by Lyons Press. It's a very good book. This would be a book that is recommended. I've read the book. I know people who've read it more than once because they enjoy it so much.
That would be me.
Okay, and it's called Favorite Wife, Escape from Polygamy. It's a good book. It's recommended reading if you want to learn about the LeBaron polygamist group and some of the things that the wives of the LeBarons went through. It's absolute poverty, absolute horrid living conditions sometimes. Susan, where can you buy the book?
I do believe it's available almost anywhere. Most bookstores, if not all of them, carry it, and also Amazon and Barnes & Noble online.
Okay, good, thank you. We do, like I said, recommend that you read that book. I read this email from this lady because it seems like that people do not often talk about the victimization of the males in the book. Mm-hmm. And I am reading a book right now written by a man from the FLDS, and I'll talk about that on another show. But it's horrid, some of the things that the males went through, and of course they grow up that way. So being victims, and they don't know they're being victimized.
No.
So I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss this idea. We're each from different polygamy groups. You're from the LeBaron group.
Correct.
You're from the FLDS, and I'm from the Kingston group. So there's a good, difference of groups here. We lived in different areas of the country. You lived out of the country.
Yeah.
A lot.
In Mexico, mostly.
In Mexico most of the time. And so we learned many different things because we were in different groups, but we learned many of the same things as well.
Yeah.
And so I thought, starting with you, Kathie, perhaps we can discuss what you saw in the FLDS community of how males, whether it's in your family or families around you, of the males that were victimized, how they are victims rather than just the women and kids.
Well, when I was growing up, when I was young, I was very unaware, and it didn't occur to me looking back. I remember events where I'm thinking, oh, that's what was going on. Recently, and for the past several years, everybody from male children to male teens, lost boys, children being male children being molested, and fathers and adults. They are victims too. My father, Warren, set in motion a destruction of family emotional bond. He started separating fathers from wives and wives from children, and before you know it, and my father was a victim of that. He was separated from his family and children and sent to repent. There are so many victims within these cults and these societies that we don't recognize. I quickly want to say that I received an email from a young boy who lives in Cleveland, Ohio. And he's doing a report. He's 15 years old. He sent a picture. He's an African-American young man. And he asked me, is this the Kathie Jo Nicholson from Polygamy? And I responded, yes, this is Kathie Jo Nicholson, formerly in Polygamy.
Yes.
He said, I can't believe it. I want to talk to you. He says, I think I'm the only kid in this state that has an interest. I want to do a report on polygamy, and I'm fascinated with Warren Jeffs and whatnot. He mentioned throughout the email several things and had several questions, but his one point that really caught my attention, and I do agree with, he said, I know that Warren is a bad man. I know he's done terrible things, but I wonder if people ever stop to think that maybe those things happened to him, and that helped to create the monster that he is.
Victimized himself.
Yes.
Highly possible, isn't it?
Yes.
Highly
And I
possible.
just thought, that's food for thought.
Yeah, it is. And whether or not anything like that comes out, we don't know. But the victimization, even just in the doctrine of polygamy for salvation. What about the LeBaron group? Did you see much specifics that you'd like to talk about?
I think what I notice still today is you become what you're raised with. You learn a certain doctrine, you believe that it's correct, you get involved with it, such as polygamy. We were taught that in order to go to the highest degree of glory in heaven and become a God yourself, that you had to be involved in living polygamy. Because there were tests in polygamy that you would go through that would help you to grow and to learn more than the average person learns. Such as a woman would learn how to deal with jealousy from the other wives. And she would have to overcome this and learn how to love her sister wives. And so this was a test. But for the men, they had to learn how to become supermen, pretty much.
Pretty much, huh?
Because a man with one wife and one family of children, the way we looked at it is he had it made. It was easy for him. So a man that had more than one wife and continued to have more and more children, he had to exercise his brain, exercise his ingenuity, and in order to take care of them all. And he was basically, the boys were coerced from the time they were young, that they had to enter into polygamy. And you know, I remember one of my husband, Verlin LeBaron's, one of his sons, well, there was more than one, but I'm thinking about just one right now. He had one beautiful little wife. He was very much in love with her. They were a great couple. And he was told, it's time for you to take a plural wife. Some of the brethren, you know, basically pressured him into taking another wife. And he really didn't want to. He was happy with his wife, but he knew that he had to for his eternal progression.
Right, exactly.
So he did. He married another young woman. And he really didn't love her. But he was doing the right thing, and the way he looked at it. And so immediately this started causing trouble with his first wife. She was jealous. She couldn't stand to have this other woman in there. And of course, this boy, Verlin's son, was caught in the middle of both of these women fighting over him, and he wanted to keep them both happy. And how do you do that? Well, long story short, he ended up with neither wife.
Yeah.
And I could give you lots of...
And there's a lot of emotional pain in the boys and in the men.
Oh,
when
of
this
course.
happens. They don't maybe show it as maybe as other men might, but it's there. And now I don't know if the men in the leadership family received priority treatment. They did in the Kingston group and still do receive priority treatment, and the other males outside that are not in the leadership family would suffer. They're not worthy. You know, there's a big worthiness issue going on, and the priesthood issue.
Well, emotionally, I know that my father would fret always about how am I going to gain a third wife. He was actually assigned two wives that it didn't work out with, and finally, when he was a grandpa of I don't know how many children, and his back was giving out, and you know, he was ready to be a grandpa, not a brand new honeymooner.
Exactly.
He was given a young third wife, and he was elated, and he had a heart attack about 2 weeks after that.
Oh my goodness.
It's physically difficult for them.
Well, that's
as
why
well.
God made it older men to be grandpas, not papas, and not married to these young women that's going to start brand new families when they're old men.
Yes, and of course the children suffer because daddy's not strong enough to play with them anymore, and the other wives suffer because they're jealous of the new little beautiful thing.
That's right. Somebody recently from the group that I'm working with told me, I was talking to her about this, and she said, well, the sons watch the fathers, and they learn by example.
Yes.
And as they watch their fathers, they're going to copy as they grow up. And if a father is particularly angry or abusive, guess what?
That young man becomes the same.
He grows up to copy what his father was. Now, this isn't 100%. Of course, we can't make a blanket statement, but it's pretty close to what happens in them, and it happens generationally. And the further down you go generationally, it seems like the results are more destructive and more dramatically disastrous in each family as it goes. What about abuse? Now, you mentioned up the abuse, especially sexual abuse. We wouldn't think that with all the polygamy going on, that there would be a need of sexual abuse for the boys, where the boys themselves get raped. Yet it happens.
It's inconceivable. It was that thought would never have entered my mind until recently. It's coming out, and it is so prevalent, and it's generation upon generation. And it evolves into, it's just accepted, it's okay. And the kids, I think, they know it's wrong in their heart, but their superiors, the people they are supposed to be emulating and respecting, their leaders are the ones that are doing it and telling them it's okay. So what kind of conflict does that create in a child's mind? What kind of damage does that carry through? And then they become a man, and perhaps continue.
And there's some kind of problems that result, whether it's they copy or whether it's something else. It comes out, but that's what happens. Polygamous men, I believe, from my observation, are rarely daddies to their children. They're fathers. They may father dozens of children. But they're rarely daddies.
That's correct.
Was Verlin able to be a daddy to all his kids? How many, he had
no.
50-some kids, didn't he?
He did, yes. He ended up with 58 children. I had 5 of them. And you know, I was the 6th of Verlin's 10 wives. And I had 5 children really fast by the time I was 23. I started out when I was 15.
Yeah.
And you know, he didn't have time to be a dad. He really didn't. My kids didn't know him. They didn't know him. You know, he'd come home and it was like he was visiting me, and he had an hour, you know, because he was so busy with everything. And so he'd maybe give the kids a pat or pick them up and throw them up in the air, and then he'd shove them outside so he could spend time with their mother during the time that he was there.
And the time was short.
And the time was short. And so no, he was not. And it was the same with the rest of his children. You know, I know it was.
Yeah.
They needed a dad, and honestly, he would have loved to have had a relationship, but he was too busy. He had too many kids, and of course, he didn't know their birthdays.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And you know, God he wanted families. He set up the family unit. He set up the first marriage, which was one man and one woman, and he didn't make it so that a man had too many children to be a daddy.
You mentioned something a minute ago about they're not dads, they're fathers.
Yeah.
And that was something that we were instructed to do when there's a power change came about in the Jeffs when they came into power, when Rulon T. Jeffs took over the leadership in our community. The rule across the board was no more dad. Your head
That's
of the
right.
household is father. That was the most difficult thing. I never caught on, you know. But when I left and I'd come home, it was bizarre to hear my toddler brothers and sisters saying "father," "mother," instead of "mama," "daddy."
Yeah.
You know.
And
Yeah.
isn't it much more nurturing to be able to say mommy and daddy or mother and dad?
I think it'd just be so nice to say whatever you want. Sometimes my kids come up with the strangest names for me. It's okay.
Yeah. And then they go through the stage where you call you by your first name, you know, and that's really precious. Okay. In August, when you were on the show, Susan, we talked at length the blood atonement doctrine that was first introduced by Joseph Smith into the early Mormon Church.
Yeah.
And of course it was highly endorsed and practiced by Brigham Young, and all of this is in the church records.
Yes,
it's not
it is.
something we're just sitting here to make up. The blood atonement concept even became part of the temple endowment ceremony and was used clear up to 1990.
Yes,
that's
correct.
how integral of a part it was in the church doctrine. The Orville LeBaron group had a lot of polygamists at one time actually living on the edge of life, wondering if they were going to be shot that day by one of LeBaron's henchmen.
Yes, that's true. I would like to make a distinction, though, between the Orville LeBaron group and the Joel LeBaron group, with Joel being the prophet of the church that I was raised in, and Orville being his brother who broke away from his group and started his own church that he called the Church of the Lamb of God.
And they were the only ones that did
yes,
blood
Orville was
atonement.
the only one. It wasn't Joel's group or that I was affiliated with at all. It was Orville and some of the people that broke away with him that actually did the blood atonement, carried out the blood atonement doctrine. And it came from Orville, who got it from reading Brigham Young's doctrine.
And some of the stories that
Yes.
they have.
That doctrine can be found. Rulon T. Jeffs that's in writing. Warren's on audio tape. Quoting
For the FLDS.
For the FLDS, yes. Warren Jeffs, who's now in jail awaiting trial,
Yeah.
and his father, the former prophet, they also have documented condoning and encouraging blood atonement.
Well, I know in Carolyn Jessup's book, Escape, she mentioned that Warren Jeffs wanted to bring blood atonement back, but he couldn't until there was a temple, and then this temple was built down
Yes.
in the El Dorado compound,
Yes.
and so there was that fear that they were either going to start or had already started doing it.
And one of his daughters, one of Carolyn's husband's daughters, was threatened with blood atonement, and I don't know whatever happened with that, but.
Well, Kathie, you have a story yourself that you're kind of dealing with In fact, that's one of the reasons that you're here in the area.
Yes,
is
it
because of, and whether it's blood atonement or not, you're trying to find out. You're trying to find out information. Would you want to take a few minutes and tell our viewers about your situation?
I would love to. Thank you for the opportunity. I am here in Salt Lake City on a fact-finding mission. I'm very concerned about my little brother, John William Nicholson. He died over 5 years ago. Johnny died on July 24th, 2004, and I would like to see justice for Johnny. He was 22 years old, and I believe my little brother was blood atoned. There are just a few of the reasons, these are just a few of the reasons that I believe this, and I'll state them now. I want to be concise, and so I've written it down.
Before you state the reasons, do you want to tell us what happened? How he died?
Yes, and I'm going to. I just was trying to be concise,
okay.
and I'm going to go ahead and just read it if that's okay.
That's fine.
And, okay, thank you. Johnny's body was recovered at the bottom of a 250-foot cliff. He was an avid rappeller for over 12 years. I had seen him rappel, and he was an expert. He was an outdoorsman. It is said that on this night, July 24th, 2004, he used a 50-foot rope with no knot in his link to catch in case he were to fall. He used a 50-foot rope to rappel 250 feet.
Well, that doesn't make much sense, does it?
Not to me. It was reported by witnesses that there was no alcohol involved, and was later proven through blood drawn that there was indeed no alcohol. Because when I first heard, I thought, you know, my brother drinks beer around the campfire, maybe he had a few, got delusional and did something. And that would be my only explanation for him doing that. But there was no alcohol in his blood. Johnny was careful about that. He would drink afterwards. Also, it is reported the incident occurred at dusk, around 8:30 or 9. Remember, this is during the summer, so it's later, light later.
Right.
It was on a holiday. Everyone was having fun, campfires, doing their thing. It was
July 24th.
July 24th was the holiday.
Utah holiday.
It's a Utah holiday, and it's called Pioneer Day. And this is a known and documented date that throughout the years, throughout history, has been used to perform blood atonement, July 24th.
Wow.
The significance of it being set as a holiday in Utah is it's when Brigham Young came to the valley, I believe, and said this is the place, or is it that it's when they gained statehood? I think it's when Brigham Young.
It's when Brigham Young, the pioneers entered the valley.
Okay, and he said this is the place. But that is what they're celebrating, and this blood atonement thing, I believe, began with Brigham Young. Okay, however, the Washington County Police Department, like I said, this occurred and was stated that it occurred at dusk. However, the Washington County Police Department was not called to the scene until 2 a.m. The Colorado City Police had been alerted, according to witnesses, at 9:30. This incident occurred in Washington County. Why weren't they called? Why weren't they on the scene immediately? When asked in October 2005, when I had recovered enough emotionally to go back and start asking questions, I knocked on the door of a Washington County rescue member. I asked him questions. He said, "I remember Johnny Nicholson's case very well. It was discussed at the time among my crew that Johnny's case was very suspicious and did not make sense. But we came late and we had nothing left to see." I last spoke to my brother
Excuse me, can we go back just a little bit there? You talked about the police were involved, but it was the Colorado City Police.
Colorado City Police.
The polygamous police.
Yes, and the Colorado City Hilldale Police Department is comprised 100% of FLDS members that answer
Right.
directly to the prophet.
Right.
The prophet at that time was Warren Jeffs, who was on the top 10 most wanted list by the FBI and who is now in jail.
Right, in Arizona. So those were the only police that had been notified, and the other police in Washington County had not been until 2 o'clock in the morning.
2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And the incident happened at dusk.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't fall in Colorado City. He didn't fall in Hilldale. He fell in Washington County.
So they should have been the
They
ones
should have
notified
been-
first.
Yes. That didn't happen. I'll go on. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, that answered my question.
Okay. I last spoke to my little brother on his birthday less than a month before his death. He had to talk to me in person, he said. It was about a messy falling out that he had had with his longtime friend and employer, Leslie Jeffs. He had walked off the job after a heated discussion with Leslie. He was currently, at the time I was on the phone with him, with my dad at Blaine Jeffs' place of business. I questioned him. He refused to elaborate on the details over the phone and promised I could expect him to visit soon. He would travel from Utah to Maine, across the country, to talk to me in person about what was plaguing his mind.
Can I ask you a question? Are Leslie and what was the other Jeffs, Blaine, are they related to Warren Jeffs?
They are, and I thank you for asking that because I'd like to elaborate. The next point that I'd like to make is that the week that my brother died was the same week that Brent Jeffs accused his uncles, Leslie, Blaine, and Warren Jeffs, of sodomy and rape when he was a child. Brent Jeffs states in his book that is published and available.
What book?
It's Lost Boy.
I'm reading that book now. Yeah, I'm about halfway through.
Yes, I know this Lost Boy, and he's a wonderful, wonderful
very
man.
Sad story.
Strong kid.
Yeah.
He stated in his book that he feared telling his story because he was afraid he might be hunted and blood atoned. The correlation that I'd like to draw here is Brent Jeffs and my brother Johnny Nicholson were friends. They went to school at Alta Academy for 8 years, 1st through 8th grade.
They're the same age.
Same age, same classroom, year after year.
With Alta Academy being?
Alta Academy is the school that was run completely 100% by Warren Jeffs as the headmaster. This is where the abuse occurred. I'm here on a fact-finding mission, and I went and toured the old house yesterday. And viewed the area that my brother and Brent, the classrooms and the bathrooms and cubby holes, and that's the area where Brent was abused and the area that my brother went to school with him. I'll move on. So another point I'd like to make clear is that, again, the 24th of July has been known through history to be a date where they do the blood atoning. 2 other deaths occurred on the same day that my brother died.
Oh.
The very same day, and they were both falls.
Are you talking
FLDS.
Same day, same year.
FLDS?
FLDS. Yes, I'm sorry. I should make that clear. FLDS in Warren's flock.
There was 3 of them that died on the same day from falls?
3 total. My brother was one. There were 2 others. One was a fall down was said to be a fall, death from a fall down the stairs. The other one was a fall, and I am not clear on the details of that because, like happens so often, the details are buried.
Yeah.
Yes.
The details of my brother's case have been buried. I showed proof of full-blooded siblingship. I paid I begged, I pleaded with the Attorney General, Mark Shurtleff, with the Washington County Police Department, with the Colorado City, with the mayor, to get, all I wanted to see was my brother's, the police report, the file. They said that there should have been photos. They said there should have been, you know, any kind of evidence. They said that a boot was found and a wallet was found. Nothing. They would release nothing. They said it had been segregated. They couldn't give out. I couldn't even, other than the witnesses that were there and were our escorts at the funeral, I would refer to them as our guards.
So what is
those were the witnesses that I got all my details from.
Why do you feel like he was blood atoned? What would have been the purpose behind this?
My feeling are the points that I make about Brent. He had a relationship with him. He was aware. He may have been abused along with Brent. He may not have. He may have. He worked for Leslie. I have a source, a very reliable source, my brother's best friend at the time. I don't want to mention his name unless he'd like to do that. He has quoted to me in writing that the issue that Johnny was going to come cross country to talk to me about was his falling out with Leslie. And what happened was he asked him when he found out Brent was coming forward, he said, "Is it true? Is it true? Did this happen?" And Leslie shifted his eyes, shook his head, and John said right there, "I knew, I knew." And at the time, another young man who was indeed our guard at the funeral and supposedly was present at the fall, I'll say his first name if that's okay. Maybe not?
Well, probably not.
Okay. He was our guard at the funeral. He, Johnny, and this other young man that I talked to, they got into a heated debate at that time because my brother was telling the friend, "This is a BS. Warren's not a true prophet. Leslie is lying. I've known this man for 5+ years. I've worked for him. I've lived with him. I've traveled with him. I've stayed in hotels with him." He shifted his eyes. He looked away. He shook his head no. But he said, "It's all falling into place now. This is not right, and I'm going to do something about it." The other boy, that I won't mention his name, that was the guard, became extremely agitated and defensive. And this was, you know, before his death. And it so happens that boy who was defending Warren at the time was assigned to us, was a witness at the, or was the one that was assigned to call my mother and inform her of her son's death. He told us that he saw my brother's spirit come up out of his body as he fell, and that it was meant to be. Then he told a later story where my brother had fallen 250 feet and was still moaning at the bottom, and they were trying to get down to him.
So the story changed.
It changed over and over. I know that I don't have much time.
I guess my question at this point would be, so you're on a fact-finding. You're trying to find, more information or more people that will listen to the story and investigate it?
Yes, I am looking for...
You've tried the FBI and they don't want to deal with it.
I've tried the FBI. I've gone to them. I've gone to the Attorney General. I've gone to some young men who have been very reticent. I think that they are frightened. I know that there are people, young boys, witnesses. I know there are people out there that have a heavy burden with this secret.
So what are you asking?
There's people out there that know that what happened and you would like them to contact.
Yes, and recently a couple have come forward and confirmed that, yes, Warren was behind this. But there's not enough evidence.
Right.
I need someone to help me connect the dots.
Okay.
And I'm asking, please, give me your burden.
Yeah.
You know, it's anonymous.
Yeah.
I'm begging, I need help to connect the dots. I just want to know the truth. If it was indeed an accident, I just want an explanation that makes sense.
And if there's somebody out there that's listening or hearing your plea, they can contact you from the website outofpolygamy.com.
They can contact me at outofpolygamy.com. They can contact you and I.
TV at
Talk,
aboutpolygamy.com.
yes,
You
often.
can contact us there.
And I would just ask that, excuse me,
We know that blood atonement is very difficult to get to when it comes to the polygamy groups. It's very difficult to prove,
Yes.
but
It
it's
is.
not impossible.
No.
and you know, justice needs to be served.
Yes. Yes. And of course, we know that they deny blood atonement.
Mm-hmm.
They deny that even the mainline church denies that it ever was part of.
They do.
It was something
definitely.
they talked about, but certainly not something. Well, Kathie, we're with you on this in heart and in spirit
you.
and in prayer.
Thank you.
And we do pray that God would bring forward the things that are necessary for you to get closure
Yes,
on
and
this
justice.
and justice on
Yeah.
it. He's a God of justice. He's a God of mercy, but he's also a God of justice. And we
well, he's
will-
given me a fire inside that I'm not being able to
yeah.
let go of. So
Yeah, yeah, we understand that.
Yes.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
There's been some very difficult things with the blood atonement, as you shared when you were on the show. And I do know that the Ervil LeBaron group put the polygamy, well, they did kill the leader of the All Red group, and so many of the polygamists were just on edge for the longest period of time, just scared that they were going to be next.
Well, you know, it wasn't just, of course, it wasn't just Ervil's henchmen or his group that were worried that they might step out of line and be blood atoned for their sin. Ervil first killed his own brother, who was the prophet of my group, Joel LeBaron, and probably the most well-known one was the murder of Rulon Allred in Salt Lake.
And he did that so that he could kill your husband.
Yes,
That was
and
basically the
yes,
reason he was killed.
Yeah, absolutely. My husband became the leader of the church that Joel left, and his life from that point on was constantly in danger. I very rarely knew Verlin or was his wife when he wasn't in hiding. You know, he was constantly worried that his own brother was going to find him, and Ervil made many attempts to kill Verlin throughout the time that I was married to him, in the 8 years that I was married to him. So.
And the main idea behind blood atonement, and then we can move on to the next subject, but I just felt like I needed to mention this, is that originally it started with Joseph Smith and Brigham Young,
Yes.
that there were sins that a man or a woman could commit that the blood of Jesus Christ wouldn't cover.
Correct.
And so they had to die. Their own blood had to be shed for their own sins.
In order for their own salvation, they had to
Right.
shed their own blood.
So they-
yes.
yeah.
Or if you cared for, if you, Rulon T. Jaff states, and I have that in writing, I believe on my website, if you care enough about your brother and you see him commit a sin, would you be willing to shed his blood so that he can go to heaven? Would you
Right.
be willing?
And that's being a real true friend to
Yes,
that person to do
apparently
that.
so.
And
And
that,
that-
by the way, was taught by the early Mormons.
And it was
as
found,
well.
I think Brigham Young was
he did that.
really, really adamant about
I believe
that.
that's found in the Journal of
It
Discourses.
is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
Journal
in
of
other
Discourses.
writings as well, but the Journal
Yeah.
of Discourses has a lot
Right.
about it. That's very true. And just to remark, Jesus is the Savior.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
not a sin that we can commit that the blood of Jesus cannot cover. The blood atonement is blasphemous, it's cruel, it's barbaric, and
it terrorizes.
it is a terror. It
Will you
definitely
quote
is
my
that.
favorite verse in Ephesians?
For by grace you are saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works.
I love
so
it,
no
not of
man can
works.
boast.
I was going to
Thank
be
you.
quoting that.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
You can too. We still got time. Okay. I receive a lot of phone calls and emails from people. Some of them are positive emails, some of them are critical, even on the subject matter I'm going to bring up, and that is, why do I do what I do? Some of them say, you're doing good, keep on doing it, you know, you're getting the word out. Other people will say, why don't you just leave people alone? Why don't you just live and let live? You got out, that wasn't for you, but other people, just let them do what they're doing. And so of course I give them the answer that, first of all, I'm called to do it, and we'll talk about this. This is our next discussion. Susan, why do you go out of your way you have, right here, you're sitting here out of your way. You hadn't planned on doing this. You were going to come down and meet with her and chat with her and go home. But you made the commitment to help us on the show tonight. Why do you do it? Why do you talk to people and tell people about your experiences and share your faith?
You know, I was trapped. I feel it was trapped. I was trapped in polygamy from the time I was 6 years old. Well, and I became a polygamous wife when I was barely 15. I believed that that was God's will for my life. It took me probably 3 years of being involved in polygamy and about 3 children by then before I started realizing that there was something really seriously wrong. Mm-hmm. And you know, I started searching scriptures, I started praying. I really didn't have a relationship with God, but I believed that He was, you know, a supreme being. And I started praying, and I was crying out to Him because I was so unhappy. And I felt like there was something wrong with polygamy. Why did God love His male creations more than He did His little females? And it didn't seem right. The man had all of the rights, the women had none. And from that point on, God started leading me out of polygamy. And I feel like He called me out of polygamy. And it took me about 3 years before I recognized through friends that Jesus saves, that He is a total, complete Savior, that I can't save myself. Nothing that I can do will save me.
Or have anything to do with you being saved.
Absolutely. It's totally by grace that I have been saved, not of myself. And that was such a revelation, and that was the beginning of my joy, because I felt like I was such a sinner inside. I mean, on the outside I looked pretty good, but inside I knew I had all sorts of crap going on inside.
And we all do know that.
Yeah, well, you know, I found hope. I found trust and faith in Jesus, and I found, for the first time, true hope. Mm-hmm. And you know, once I had come out of polygamy, I realized how blessed I was, and I realized how blessed I was to have Jesus as my personal Savior, and that was something that I never learned in polygamy. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what the meaning of that was. Mm-hmm. And I looked back at my life in this fundamentalist Mormon sect, and I felt so blessed, and I wanted so bad to share what I had found with my family and my friends, and those that didn't know Jesus and know the joy that I feel in my life. Yeah. And that's why I'm here today, and why I feel compelled. I have to share. That's why I wrote my book. Yeah. It's because I wanted to share what I had found. You know, and coming out of polygamy, I was so miserably unhappy, and I think all women in polygamy, whether they want to admit it or whether they have to keep it silent, I think they're very unhappy, because God created women to need a mate, a soulmate.
Of their own.
Of their own. Mm-hmm. Of their own. I mean, that's why He said, one man and one woman, and the two shall become one, and it's in Genesis, it's throughout the New Testament, and this was God's perfect plan.
It's actually in the Book of Mormon, too. I wish that I could remember the verses, but I could look them up and send them to you.
Well, this is why I do what I do, because I found freedom, and I want to share it with other people.
And you want to share it with others.
I do.
Right. And Kathie, why do you do what you're doing? You also could have said no, you don't want to come on the show.
I take every single opportunity that I can get my hands on, and this has just been recently since my brother's death, I must admit. I'm so grateful to the people in my life that helped get me out. My Uncle Dave, my grandma, my family was first generation. We came in from LDS because my dad fell in love with 2 women. Yeah. And anyway, I had that outside family holding their hand out, and that little glimpse, and I'm grateful for that. When I finally left, I left with a very, very supportive friend that I married, and we we should have remained friends, and we still are friends. We're not married any longer, but all those people that reached out to me, I'm grateful for, and I know that Jesus had a hand in that, and I know that there's a reason for that. I want to say, and this is not my quote, it's profound, though. I believe it's by Edmund Burke, and it is the reason that I do what I do. Evil prevails when good men do nothing.
Do nothing.
And I want to do something. And I was silent for such a long time because I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and I thought people would think I was a nut if I talked about it. I was just trying to be worldly. I was just trying to fit in and wear shorts. And and when my brother died, it burned deep, deep down inside, and it just doesn't go away. And I just I had hands reaching out to me, and so did the people inside reaching out. Just grab a hold. And
well, you know, there are some people, of course, they're critics usually, that will say, are you trying to get people out of polygamy just so that you can get them into your belief system? And of course, we don't make any bones about it on the show that we're Christian, and I don't want to. Jesus says, if you're ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of you. So but we don't force it on anyone either. Some people say you don't even want to bring religion into it when you're dealing with polygamists. They've had it up to here with religion. But we can't bring them out of the hopelessness of the polygamous life and drop them into more hopelessness. We have to show them the hope of
Absolutely.
Jesus.
I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't have found Jesus, because
so
I was
different,
on my own for 3 years. After I left polygamy, I was the most lost little soul.
I know
With
that
5
feeling.
little
You feel
kids,
dead.
I had absolutely nothing. And once I became a Christian, and once I really and truly understood that my sins weren't on my shoulder anymore, that Jesus had taken them, and that all I had to do was to believe in Him, and that I was going to go to heaven. I didn't have to wonder if I was going to go to heaven anymore. That was the thing that I always wondered.
No
matter how good I was, I didn't have the assurance. Never knew for sure whether, I'd done enough good to make up for the bad I'd done, that sort of thing. And once I became a Christian, I knew that I was going to get to go to heaven, and that's where I found my real joy. And I would hate to have someone come out and go through what I went through and not get to know.
We've got to introduce them to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that, and feel free to butt in any time if you want. I've got something to say.
I have something to say, but you go first.
Well, the word I like is the word gospel, because it has a meaning. And it has a real definitive meaning, and it means good news.
Yes.
And all my life, after I had left the polygamy group, I thought it meant bad news. I thought God was bad news. I thought I was looking over my shoulder, waiting for Him to zap me, and I even thanked God for not being a zapper, because He's not. He's gracious and merciful. He's good news.
Yes, He is.
Not bad news.
It is different for everybody, though. I'll tell you, when I left, it took me, it was a long
me 25
journey.
years, Kathy Jo. 25 years.
That makes me feel better. Because when I left, in my, not just physically, but when in my mind, I left it, I felt dead. I felt like I was opening the door into a dark hole, and I was hopeless and helpless, and I hit rock bottom over and over. There's not just one rock bottom. And it finally, when I had my son, it began. And I wanted him to have that simple truth. Even if I didn't believe it at the time, I wanted him to have that simple. So I got him involved in the Christian group Awana, and then I was jealous, and I thought, I want to have that too. And so I started to study, and I wasn't buying into that it was so simple. Oh no, there's got to be more. There's got to be more than this.
Yeah.
And when it finally hit me, it is that simple.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
exactly right. I remember that same feeling.
And we even had a caller call in one night. I think you were on the show, and they wondered why you would give up the complexity of the gospel of their gospel to go into the simplicity of the Christian gospel, because it's
tough to do, believe it or not.
It is tough to do, but it's the beauty of it, is that the simplicity that's in Christ.
It's arrogant to think that we can be perfect all the time. It's arrogant to think we can earn.
It's impossible to think that at all. So, for a minute, we each have a minute, let's say. What would you say to our viewers? We have viewers that are polygamists, women perhaps who are, and men, children maybe, who are hoping for a better life. Maybe they're wishing they could leave, and they would if they had to have a chance, or maybe they are too afraid to because they're afraid of God and men. Take just a minute to speak to those.
I'll I'll take less than that. John chapter 8, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. If you look for the truth, knowledge is power, you know. If you can't ask questions and expect an answer or get an answer, or not allowed to ask questions or asked to keep secrets, there's something wrong.
And and don't say, I already know the truth, because unless you've investigated it, you really don't know if you know it.
If you know the truth from what your prophet has told you or from what your dad has told you, it's not enough.
No, you have to find out for yourself.
And it's out there.
And
there. I don't want to preach to you. I just find it on, look for it. It's there.
Ask God for it. He'll show it to you
Yes.
if you really want it.
Right.
Susan, what will you say to our viewers? Our polygamous viewers watching. Maybe they wish they had the courage that they think we had to get out.
Well, you know, one of the things that frightened me the most about leaving my community and crossing the border in the United States with my kids was I was taught my whole life that all other sects were an abomination in the sight of God. And I wanted I believed in a creator, although I was so confused I didn't really know what I believed, but I did believe in God. I didn't really have a relationship with him, but I knew in looking around me at this wonderful world and everything in it that there had to be a creator. And I really believed that I could find him. But being as how I had been taught my whole life that it was fundamentalist Mormonism or nothing, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I wanted my kids raised to believe in Jesus. And I guess what I want to say is, if there's any of you out there that are worried about that same thing, please don't. Please don't. There is absolutely the most beautiful, complete, simple answer available. And I ask you to take some time, read your scriptures, and I would like you to read Romans, because that talks about what I'm talking about over and over and over throughout it. And that's what I'd like to say.
Okay. And I'll just make the closing remarks that I agree with everything, of course, that they've said. It's ditto for me. I spent 25 years before I discovered the truth in Jesus Christ, and that's not in polygamy, and it's not in the Kingston Polygamy group, which is the group I thought it was in. It's impossible to describe the freedom that we have in Christ until you yourself experience it. But it's a freedom that only Christ can give us. Only He can give us that freedom. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Good night.